So I didn't adjourn the select board meeting. I assume this is just a continuation of the select board
You're
meeting.
correct. You're correct.
Okay.
So it's good you didn't. I guess you could have just opened it again.
Right.
Hi, Peg.
Hello. Hello, all.
I do want to mention one thing before we get started, that the secretary to the select board, Linda Scott, has a hard stop at 7:25. Linda? Okay,
7:25 would be excellent. Thank you.
okay. So with any luck, if we can be done by then, that would be great.
We can do that. Hopefully.
And every committee is posted.
Finance committee, it does not, the chairman is not going to show up tonight. So we have a full 6-person representatives here tonight, I believe.
Bob, would you be willing to chair and call the meeting to order?
Okay, I'm calling it to order right now.
And the select board is started our meeting at 6:15. So it's a continuation.
Okay, personnel board, call the meeting to order.
Well, if I may, I'd just like to make one comment from my point of view, not speaking for the rest of the FinCom, but for myself. I find this whole, the sequence of this to be a little bit annoying, I guess is the word, because I think we should have been seeing this stuff as a FinCom before we got to meet with everyone else, so that we could do our discussions on it and our recommendations, so that, but now we've gone to the second meeting where we're meeting with the board, the select board and the personnel committee, and we never did have that meeting of the FinCom to review this. So it's a little frustrating because we have a lot more people here, so the discussion is going to be very different than it would have been if we had an opportunity to do it the way which I think we normally do it. But there it is. That's just my comment.
Well, the only thing I'll say to that, Bob, is we finished it the night before we met last week. We've been working on this and it wasn't ready till last week. So essentially this is the process. If you wanted to meet with the personnel board before the select board, we could have presented it to you that way. But I'm not sure what the difference is, and we still have lots of time to work this out. It's not like we're up against the wall on this. So, I understand what you're saying, but I think it's going to be fine, and we'll be able to get a reasonable process.
Just a comment.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Maybe if the finance committee wants to take, seems like we have 45 minutes. If the finance committee wants to take 15 minutes and we can sit back and, the rest of us who are here and have a discussion, I'd be totally fine with that.
I don't know what the rest of the committee feels like. I think I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to have you just sitting there twiddling your thumbs.
It's not a waste of time. I think it would be, it'd be very useful to hear what the finance committee has to say.
Do you, Bob?
I for one would be happy to. And Melissa, Eric.
Yeah, no, that's fine with
You
me.
guys fine? Okay.
And what about, I was going to say, would 15 minutes be enough time, Bob? Do you think 15, 20 minutes?
I think maybe we'll just see. I think that it probably will be useful. And I'd just like to open up the discussion with the finance committee and see what people have to say about this whole, about the issue of the project that the personnel board has presented to us. The issue of that, whether that should be something we have to but consider in the light of our whole budget process and what, you know, and how it fits into that, and just generally philosophically what we think about this. So I'll open it up to the rest of the FinCom. Jim, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Has this, are we having trouble retaining employees? Have people come forward and saying, you're not paying me enough, I want more money? Has this been an issue? Because if it has, that would be news to me.
Becky? Oh, it's their committee, sorry.
Becky, oh, she's used to speaking at our committee. Go ahead, Becky.
Yes, I have had people coming and saying, and there are a number of the positions that are listed here where we had a great deal of trouble hiring. We went 2 years unable to hire an equipment operator. We went through about 2 or 3 maybes. So that's been an issue. The land use clerk hiring has been an issue. We were fortunate in some other positions, but it's clear that, and the financial folks have been aware, especially the collector and the assessor, that our pay compared to others, our neighbors in Franklin County even, is below average. And so, yes, Jim, we have been hearing that, and we have struggled to hire.
Susie.
I've been thinking a lot about this personnel salary process, and I want to give my perspective, and I've written it down so I won't get jumbled up. When the broadband presented its budget, it contained a 79% salary increase for the MLP manager, and this was received largely without comment, questions, and with support by Bob and Jim. And this was an increase, this increase was not a part of the personnel board process. When the personnel board recommended a market alignment for 8 employees, was met with a different reaction from Bob, questioning the hours entailed, objection about wage escalation, and comparison of contracted costs, which would be different. I'm not arguing for or against the proposed salary for Gail. I'm asking people to have empathy and recognize that we share a perspective and an equitable process of support for the people who provide services in this town. So when I see it from my perspective, I can also see it from people who supported Gail's. I see that those were some of the same issues raised, and that I expect we would deal with things more equitably.
AJ.
Yeah, I guess I want to make just a slightly different point, which is that, I mean, this feels like a project that was sort of squarely in the list of responsibilities for the personnel committee. I mean, I think we were sort of apprised of this process. I remember hearing from George and Melody a while back that the personnel committee was undertaking a study of wages for comparable wages for similar employees in neighboring towns. So I feel like this has been a very sort of a pretty transparent process. We knew that the personnel committee was going to be analyzing wages for these roles and making some recommendations if there were adjustments that seemed appropriate given that analysis. I mean, this kind of a rigorous analysis from what we can see that went into this. And, you know, the finance committee is represented by 2 members, you know, who overlap between FinCom and the personnel committee. So I kind of feel like this is one of those situations where there was a good process. A lot of hard work went into this. And at this point, for me to have like a significant objection to this, it's got to be like, it's got to be something really substantive, because the process seems like it was a good one. So that's just my perspective on it.
I'm going to just respond briefly to what Susie said. And I personally, I did ask some questions of the committee of George and when he was presenting last week. And the reason I did partly was because despite what AJ says, I was kind of floored by this. I was taken aback. I thought we were going to talk about COLA at that meeting last week. So I wasn't prepared to deal with this issue. And I was also very surprised at the extent, the size of the recommended increases in salaries. And I also looked at the methodology, and I understand, I think I understand what was done, but I also think there's a lot missing in the study that might mediate these results, these recommendations. Like, for example, just looking at the accountant, that issue I raised last week, there are only 4 towns in the data. And we don't really understand fully what happens in the other towns that use the FairCog system, what their total cost is per year versus our cost. I mean, and it's the cost is not just the hourly rate; it's also all the other adjacent costs of an employee, including their long-term retirement and healthcare benefits into the future. And also, we don't know. We know what the hourly rate is, and we know the comparison in the hourly rate, but we don't know the total hours for these various towns in the spreadsheet. So I just personally feel to make a reasonable judgment, and I would make a reasonable judgment based on equity for any given position, and think that if someone should be paid more, then we should support that. But I think it'd be on a case-by-case basis, not a sort of a wholesale approach like this. I mean, I just read the budget for the Leverett School this week. I mean, that seems like an odd thing to do. That's kind of maybe how miserable I am, but they're offering in their budget 26% increase for their teaching staff. I think they're calling it the support teachers. And the reason that they're offering it is because Shutesbury's are 26% higher. So there's a little bit of a process where towns and sort of chase each other around and pay the higher rate, always the higher rate. I'm thinking of the taxpayer here, frankly. I'm trying to control what we have to raise from the taxpayers. I see that as a real issue for me as a member of this committee. And it's not because I don't like any institution or any department, but I think my primary consideration is that of the taxpayer and for the hardship that some taxpayers suffer when they have to pay their taxes every year. So I'd like to see more information, and I'd like to see more detailed analysis of these individual proposed raise. That's my point of view. Oh, Jim, go ahead.
Well, no, George was, I believe, before me.
Oh, George, pardon me. Please.
So a couple things. First of all, it seems like a lot of money. It's less than 0.5% of the budget, but 1/3 of that total dollar amount, what is it? I think it's 32. I'd have to go back to the schedule. 7,000 of it is the COLA piece, and the COLA piece they're getting anyways. So they're going to be getting roughly $6,500 to $7,000 in COLA if we don't adjust these salaries. So really the incremental cost is not the 32, but the 24. Again, I don't have the spreadsheet open.
You like me?
No, I've got it. So it's 31,000 increase. 7,000 of it is the COLA. Most of that 7,000, call it, again, somewhere between 6,600 and 7,000, they're getting anyway. So it's really $24,000. Let's call it 24,500 that we're adding to the budget. We're building into the budget. Bob, as far as the analysis goes, we could analyze things to the end of time, but it is important. It's not bad to use as a measuring stick what other towns are paying, and other towns that are comparable to us in terms of size and demographic. There's really 2 factors in that, right? It's the hours and it's the pay rate. And so this personnel board, on a regular basis, the personnel board looks at job descriptions, talks to managers about job descriptions, and questions. Part of that conversation, I would say, is number of hours that these people work. And it's based on our experience in the history and the feedback we get. So that has been analyzed. That has not been ignored. It's just not a part of this analysis. What this analysis is to see if the rate of pay we're providing to these individuals, many of them are hourly, not all of them, is it a marketable rate? Is it equitable? Is it going to hurt us because people are going to leave? You know, all those points that we made earlier. So I don't, unless somebody's got some ideas on what the analysis should be. Now, you know, we're volunteers, so there's no doubt we could hire a consulting firm and maybe they could give us a much more in-depth analysis and think of some things that we haven't thought of. But for me, it's pretty simple. If we know that the people are working the hours that they should be working, and we can see what all the other towns pay per hour, what other way can we manage the market value? What other way can we analyze the market value? I don't know that there's any more analysis we need to do. I mean, that's coming from the guy who did a lot of it, right? But I honestly, if people have ideas, I'm willing to listen, but they need to be specific ideas.
Thanks, George. I think Susie was next.
No, Jim Hemingway was.
Oh, okay, Jim.
Yes, the reference to Gail Huntress and the MLP was not particularly relevant. Gail Huntress' salary was doubled because her workload is doubled. She took over a whole branch of running the MLP that she didn't have before. So that should take care of that. I'd also like to point out that that her wage and her paying her comes out of our subscribers, and it doesn't come from Shutesbury taxpayers in the same way that what we're discussing now does very much come from Shutesbury taxpayers. I think that it's why can't we negotiate with our employees on a case-by-case basis rather than blanketly giving everybody this rather huge increase? I think that would be particularly. And the other thing is even if you're going to consider this, the one thing that we really lack in this town is any sort of evaluation of how employees are doing. We don't evaluate them. They're sort of, everybody's off in their own little orbit, and we don't have. Gail Huntress actually proposed this a while ago, and the select board completely ignored it. We don't have any way to evaluate how our employees are doing. We don't tell them what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. None of this is done, and yet we want to throw more money at them. I just don't think this is a good idea at all.
Jim, one quick correction. This is not a blanket increase. That there's a small subset of
I know it varies.
positions that were not just that. It was a subset of town employees that have been identified by the personnel committee as having wages that are not in sync with neighboring communities. It's not every town employee listed on that spreadsheet. So I think it's a mistake to just describe this as a blanket.
I'm not describing it as a blanket increase for everyone.
I thought that's
in
what you
town.
said. Yeah.
No, that's not what I said at all. I just think that we should. Why can't we negotiate individually with our employees? It isn't like it's a huge group of people after all.
Susie, I believe you're next.
I looked at the population of the towns listed on the spreadsheet that the personnel gave us, and it's interesting how the populations varied a lot, but it pointed to the idea that in order to get your job done, all of these towns are accomplishing getting their jobs done, and towns have different expectations of what's in a job. The citizens have different demands, but in general, even though there were populations much bigger and much smaller than us, the salary rates were somewhat similar. So what it takes to get a job done is more about the job, not specifically the hours. And having been town clerk, I know you do the job until you can get it done. And it's not that there's no evaluation of these people. People interact with those employees. Becky hears from people. around those employees' interactions, and those employees talk to Becky. So there's not no evaluation process. That's it.
Well, there certainly isn't a formal evaluation process in place.
I want to ask Rita, thank you for your forbearance here. Do you want to pass into the community, the whole meeting now?
I would say, if the finance committee wants to take a few more minutes, it's about 8 minutes of 7. So I don't want to stop your discussion if the finance committee wants to continue for a few more minutes. That's my suggestion.
Okay, Peg,
I think Becky had her hand up a while back. Do you?
Becky, I know you.
I was just going to speak to why we don't negotiate individually with each employee. We have a police union that we negotiate with. The 4 department heads all have contracts that we negotiate with. If our financial people felt that they couldn't trust the boards that be to represent their interests or to be fair and equitable, they could take a path of negotiating each of their positions and develop contracts. I've had one person potentially, if we can't get it together, there's talk of, at least one person might take that path. I don't think negotiating individually strengthens the town or makes a more equitable working environment. I think if we can address issues in a way like we're asking to do now, we can show that we respect and care for our employees, that we're acknowledging the changes in the market over the last 10 years and trying to address it. I think that's a much more respectful, meaningful way to approach our employees.
I don't know if AJ or Susie was next. Do you know, Susie?
AJ, you can go. I'll go after you.
Okay, I just had a quick question. I guess anybody on the personnel board can respond, but could you just tell us if this proposal was sort of broadly approved by the committee? Were there any significant concerns or dissenting? I presume we had a vote about this, or was this pretty much kind of the consensus of the committee members that this should move forward?
I'll go ahead. We worked on it for many meetings, and the board did vote unanimously to forward this on. So it was, but George, you could fill in there, I think, but we decided to send it forward.
No, I agree with that. The only thing I would say is, we did talk about the process and the way we would go about determining what's the right amount. So once we all agreed on what the process was, the consensus just came by nature because we all realized, taking the average, making sure there's a COLA piece and making those calculations, then we all looked at it and it just fell into place. And it was easy to get consensus once we agreed on the process.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Susie's turn?
I'm wondering what our process is for tonight. I feel like we've heard from the FinCom members. I don't know if there's any more of them that want to speak, but if this is the right time for us to take a vote, I'm ready to take a vote.
I just want to ask a question for clarification of George or some other member of the committee. The question, 2 questions. One is, I believe that we're headed towards having a combined treasurer collector official in the town. And I don't know if you studied that and put those numbers into your machine, your spreadsheet, to do any kind of analysis of that. It seems that we've discussed that on the FinCom as a goal for, and Ryan is now the assistant collector, I believe. I think that's in the budget, is it not? So why are we talking about these positions at all if they're going to be a new position that will have to be, and it'll have to be determined what the fair salary for that position is. I think that might be something, a reason to take that out of there for this year. But that's one question. The other question is, I'm not sure how this works, but I don't know what this category of employee operator is. I know that, I don't know if that category ever existed before. And I know that, I know there's a lifting permit, a lifting license that some town employees have that give them a stipend, but what is this operator category? Maybe you know what that is, George or Becky? It's the highway department.
Right.
Yeah, and it's your general labor equipment operator. It's our main guys outside of Tim.
Okay, so the guys that work for the highway department who drive trucks and,
Yes,
Yes.
yes. They have CDLs and various, some have other credentials and some don't. Some have been there longer, they have varied experience. But yes, that's our highway department.
we have 2 full-time employees and
Correct.
so now we have 2 people called operators. We used to have just have highway department employees. What's
No,
this?
we've always had equipment operators. That's the job description title that was developed 25 years ago. Yeah.
I'm not, oh, thank you. I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to make a motion of some sort, Susie?
You're on mute, Susie.
Trying to find me on the screen. AJ, do you have one more question?
Oh, sorry. No, I don't.
So I'd like to make a motion that the FinCom accept the recommendations made by the Personnel Board for market alignment.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, is there any discussion on this? Any further discussion?
Arvanitis, aye.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Melody. Could you repeat your vote?
Groves, nay.
I mean, my nay.
Cashew, aye.
Mosher, aye.
Motion passes 4-2. So there, now we're done, and we're going to head into the arms of the select board.
Okay, so we don't need anything from the Personnel Committee, right? They've already done their work and had their vote, correct?
I
Okay,
believe so, yes.
all right.
So
Um,
shall we adjourn is anything else, Rita? No?
well, the select board is going to vote, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you probably should stay for that. So do I hear a motion to approve the recommendations of the Personnel Committee for the wage, for the salary adjustment,
Market realignment.
market realignment?
I'll make that motion. I make a motion that we accept the Personnel Board's recommendation for the market realignment for the positions listed in the documents.
Second.
Okay, any discussion, questions, Melissa or Eric, about the?
I don't. I was a participant in the personnel process, so I don't have any questions.
Eric?
No questions. I think Finance Committee had.
Okay, I just had one comment before we go ahead and vote, and that is that I know we're operating within the context of a municipality, but I look at these jobs and I say, we pay people very little money for what they do. And if you were to go out into the private sector and look at the skill level that we ask of town employees, they would laugh at you for this, for these salaries. So yes, I think we can look at other communities, but I think we should be paying a fair wage. And I think, I support the recommendations. So I said, we'll go ahead and we took our vote.
Can I just add one thing to that, Rita?
Sure.
I think it's also important that we acknowledge that employers, which we are employers, do these sort of things all the time. They do it
Yeah.
yearly, every couple of years to make sure they're paying their employees a market aligned wages. So just to add to what you had said, it's
Okay.
not out of the ordinary.
So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Make peace, O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Carol, aye. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and, do we hear a motion to adjourn the select board meeting?
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor? Signify by
peace,
saying
O'Neill.
aye.
Make peace, O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Carol, aye.
My thanks to the Personnel Board for their work.
Yes, and thank you.
Absolutely.
So do I hear a motion to adjourn the Personnel Committee?
So moved.
Okay, all those who say aye?
Overnight aside.
Scott, aye.
Make peace, O'Neill, aye.
Ross, aye. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Oh,
Good
and
night.
Melody, did Melody say aye?
She-
I didn't hear her.
Spoke over each other.
Okay, sorry. Okay, good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone, for more than meeting Linda's time.
Yes,
Much
thank you.
appreciated.
George, you can't go anywhere.
I'm not going. I wouldn't miss this for anything. Are you kidding?
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, April.
All right, so now we're on our own, so.
I'm
where's our
sorry,
agenda?
I actually have a hard stop at 8 o'clock tonight myself, so just FYI.
I don't have the agenda in front of me. I'll just see if I can pull it up here.
Probably want to do the minutes first.
Oh, yeah. we
Yeah.
always do. So.
I just had just one clarification about that, Bob, is I think the agenda says we're reviewing February 22nd and March 1st minutes. March 1st was that joint meeting
Right.
where we joined the select board. So when that happens, I don't do minutes since they have minutes from the meeting and they do a much better job than I do. So so I just forwarded the February 22nd minutes maybe a day ago or two, maybe it was Monday.
The 22nd.
Yeah, it was yesterday. Yeah. So those are the only minutes for us to review today.
Yeah. I don't know if everybody has those to review them on their desk or their desktop or.
Yeah, we do. I have them.
I have-
AJ sent them out.
I have them. So do anybody have any comments on those?
Looked good to me.
Yeah, me
Look at
too.
Me too.
Yep.
Do I have a motion?
I make a motion and we approve the minutes of March 22nd.
February.
February.
Oh, sorry, February 22nd. Yep, there it is.
Second.
I know. What's my hurry?
A second?
Overnight aside.
Anyway,
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, eye.
Mosier, aye.
Okay, that's done.
Yes, I came early, so I'm heading out. I was wondering.
Now, we're gonna look at the budget next. Is that the next item on the agenda?
Yep, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Becky sent it out this afternoon.
Yeah, we got another copy just minutes ago, so I don't know what was different in that, but I had marked up. on it.
I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, she said she fixed a couple formulas. She added the difference percentage.
Thank you.
And she's off somewhere now, talking to someone.
I apologize. The police almost set the alarm on me because my door was shut and I was the only one in the building. So luckily she found me
Mhm.
before I caused a bigger ruckus.
Thought you were hijacked or something.
Well.
Do you want to introduce the new draft to us and tell us what's different or?
Sure. I want to put it up on screen. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go here, do this. And do you want to start with the revenue or expense side? The expense side?
Yeah,
Did anything change on the revenue numbers? From last-
No,
No, okay.
no, I just highlighted stuff if people need explanation. Okay. Oh, that's not what we were doing. Oh, stop sharing. Sorry. It bounced to the wrong thing. Screen share. Can everyone see it?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, so
This is page 2 or 3.
so here we go. I have tried to make sure that the percentage formulas are working correctly. And the tree warden, that's definitely not right. Okay, and I need to explain something, and my apologies. I have created a new payroll data sheet that feeds into this spreadsheet. And this is a case of a wrong cell number, so I need to correct that. And my apologies, I've spotted almost, I think I have caught all the rest. So I will work on that in just a moment.
That's
So,
just the tree warden line that's affected by that?
well, all salary lines are
Oh,
fed
okay,
off
got
a different spreadsheet, all salary lines, but stopping there, it's clear that that amount is wrong.
Yeah, that's the one that's wrong. All the others work.
Yes, yes. So that'll be, should be $735 times the COLA. So I will get that corrected. I've had input from a couple people today. And so what's different on here is I was off by about $3,000. I picked up the earlier amount for the regional assessment, which was about $3,000 less than this one. So this number is $3,000 higher. And I think the treasurer's and a couple other salaries were not the right figure that I've corrected. I think you had this in what I sent out, but since the last time, I've increased the rubbish and recycle hauling from $90,000 to $100,000. And I did so after listening to the recycling committee, who have been talking with the vendors. The quote for the hauling will not be back until the 29th. They extended the deadline 2 more weeks. And they were saying that the 2 communities that use the back of the truck pickup, Irving and Gill, both towns have average over $100,000 for their hauling. So I thought it prudent to bring it up. That's not a final number. We have to wait on the quote for that.
Can I ask you a question about that, Becky?
Sure.
Just to digress for a moment. Are they just getting bids on back haulers, or are they getting bids on side loaders?
I believe Alternative is giving them a bid on side loaders.
Okay.
So there's, they're doing both. Well, the 2 that have been the most responsive, the 2 haulers that have been the most responsive, and it's USA who currently has our contract. And there's hope they might come in more aggressive than their napkin quote they gave us earlier. That was 130 plus the cost of toters for every household. Okay, and you'll notice that what I did is I put in amounts requested. And so this can be, further discussion by the finance committee. The maintenance amount for fire, what was requested at $22,000. This is up, your purview is to have further discussion if you want to reduce these numbers that have been requested, but as a starting point, I have used all numbers that were requested. I rounded up just slightly office supplies by $281, and I increased the office equipment line by $500. I'm finding the original 4,000 has not been increased in 10 years, and I'm finding it difficult to replace computers as they are needed currently. We did have some help during COVID. We were able to buy two laptops for employees out of COVID money, and we didn't have to use our line, but we still are running very tight.
How do I get my printer to print those red numbers?
You'll need a
Color.
color printer with a color cartridge.
Damn.
But at least you can see it online, Bob. So all the figures that are highlighted have been changed or updated or reviewed and not changed. I did not highlight all the salary figures yet. I got most of them, but I have to go back through and make sure I got them all. The ambulance service went up 2.5%. That's the contract with Amherst. I also, okay, I'm jumping. So I need to, yeah, I'll correct that one once I'm not talking.
Becky, could you say the line number you're thinking of? Because I can't keep up and I put the notes right
sorry.
on the thing, right on my
Okay,
paper.
I apologize. So where should I go back to? Well, the tree ward number is 105. That needs correction.
What number is that? 105? Okay, thanks.
Becky, what's the number you're going to put in there where the 12984 is?
It's gonna be the 2.42 on top of the 735.
Okay, all right, good enough.
And I'm not just gonna change the number because I need the,
Right, you want it to, it links back to, I
Yeah.
get it.
or I'll break the link. And I don't
Yeah.
wanna do
No,
that.
I get it.
Becky,
Yes,
are has the trash, the trash and recycling committee, are they open to both front, side and back, or are we sticking primarily with back? Has there been a decision on that?
their goal, if possible, is to stick with the back.
Uh-huh.
And their reason is because to do the side requires toters.
That's
So
right.
every household would have to bring a toter to the location where the truck comes.
Right.
For a lot of people, that's either down very long driveways or up private roads.
Mhm.
And so the concern is for people to be dragging even larger containers than they have now. Those containers are so large that you can't just open the back of your SUV and
No.
throw it in.
Well, who would pay for those if we were to go with side loaders? Would the town be paying for them, or would the individual homeowners be paying for them?
We discussed it.
Because
The quote is now for the town to pay for them. I mean, they would give us a quote for toters.
I see. I see. Because that wouldn't be inexpensive. They're pretty big plastic devices with wheels on them. I don't know what they
Correct.
cost, but to outfit everybody in town with one would be a substantial expense.
So
Very substantial. It's like $60,000 or $80,000.
Yeah, well,
But we
Yeah.
would decide that as a FinCom, whether we ask the taxpayers to pay individually or we do it as a town. That's the kind of stuff the FinCom decides.
Well, and the recycling committee.
Right, the recycling committee will come with a proposal, right? Or
Yeah.
Options. But the
And the
other issue with the side loaders, which occurred to me, was not only what you mentioned, Becky, that some people have to leave their trash now in a kind of a location like the top of Cooleyville Road or something, right? And
Yeah.
then some people don't get roadside pickup, or some people live on steep hills.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the truck works on some of those landscapes, but there's problems with it.
Yeah, and I've noted driving through other towns, I've seen them in Leverett. And in that case, they're individuals who contract with the company. But where I've seen them in Leverett, they've tended to be like, the houses have been closer to the road. But I did see one at the bottom of a very long driveway. So I think if people are motivated, they would do it. But if it's required of every homeowner, not every homeowner would be as motivated. And if we don't pay for all of them and disperse them to everyone, we're gonna have people that never purchase toters. And then we're gonna have trash problems. So on a policy perspective, for the town not to purchase them has its own problems.
Yeah,
Well, you're right.
sure.
I mean, and those, and people, they won't pick up your trash if you don't have one that
Right.
matches their equipment.
Yeah, and then if they just leave stuff in bags on the road, then you got a big mess. And
Yep.
so it's a tricky one. So it's, hopefully we'll get a better price than we're anticipating, but that's why I left the number there. The other,
Pardon me, Becky, one last question, or
Sure.
not, maybe not last, one other question. What we just voted on, what the finance committee just approved, that is not included in this document, is that true?
correct. So that'll add about
24,200.
24,200.
But the COLA that we voted on is incorporated in these salary lines?
Yes.
Got it.
Yep. Except for the tree warden. He's got more of a balloon bonus.
More than, yeah.
But what, so that, you just carried the balance from last year over? Is that, are you able to do that?
In what line?
The tree warden, you say, or that's just an error, right?
No, that's just a mistake. That's
Okay.
picking up like one of the finance people or the assessor's clerk. It's
That
not.
kind of money could do a clear cut.
Yeah.
I was
Some of
wondering
my
how.
house.
Yep, and we could pay for it all. Okay, and going down to our miscellaneous, the treasurer lines from I went by the notes in the minutes that AJ took, which said that we would, well, the first item, that's my estimate. We currently have a we have a document from the retirement board saying the $237,000. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's $237,000 for this year. But the problem for this year is there's always the addition of the Union 28 employee retiree amount. So just this afternoon, I got a number from Caitlin Sheridan, our new finance director, and she quoted 12,700 and something. I had estimated $13,000 to add in, so this 250 should be a good number. I could reduce it by $100 or so, and I will do that later on. The unemployment compensation, I think the result of your conversation with the treasurer, he asked for 10. We figured if 5 was put in, the 5,000 that's there now, only $200 of it has been used this year, so the balance would be close to the 10 he wanted to hit, so that would stay there. He recommended the $553,000. I think as we look at where we're coming out this year, we can tighten that number up as I always do, and I'll make sure to be in conversation with you about it. But as we monitor the expense report, I'm hoping there's room to tighten that figure up. I do know that he likes to be more cautious than we have been, but so far we've been okay. And at the end of the day, if we're off by $10,000, we've had FinCom reserve or underspent money in other lines to backfill that line. So it's, so you can be more conservative than that current figure. The Council on Governments actually had a 0.78% decrease in their assessment, which is great. I think the other numbers I wanted to go over with you were the veterans benefits. I did get the report from the veterans that I didn't get with the budget, and it was $4,284. So I'm using that figure since we haven't had any. Well, I guess last year we did have, we did use a bit of money. No, I'm just double checking. Was that last year?
No, I don't think so.
FY '22 actual. FY '22 actual. Where's our veterans? Sorry, I just lost where I was.
Line 143.
Yeah, here we go. So yeah, see, we did spend
Oh, yeah.
$1,093 last year. So it's important to have some money there every year. This remainder went into free cash, so we need to budget for it again this year.
I see.
And then the veterans program itself was a minor reduction of almost 3%. And the change, I put this note, the assistant at full hours of work. There's a slight change in what the library was asking for because they hadn't been putting all of the assistant's hours in the budget. So they're making that correction, which is.
What does that mean?
She reviewed it at the at our meting.
Well, at our meeting, she said that
presented
she
the
needed
budget.
more hours to be covered for her vacations, which I didn't quite couldn't quite compute since she's been having vacations for the last several years and the library's remained open. So I don't
Right,
know.
but during COVID, there was underspent funds because so for the last couple of years, we hadn't had a separate person who did weekends. They've been open more limited hours. The assistant continued to do a lot of support work on off days when, they couldn't be in the building at the same time for a long time. And when they are now, yeah, they still maintain, well, they can be now, but so the whole total of hours used wasn't the full budget during COVID, but now it is again. And that being the case, when Mary Ann's on vacation for a week, we need to bring in Cynthia to cover for her. And we needed to add those hours back. And I think it was only a matter of about $400, if I recall. We'll have to look at the librarian's budget. But that's why it's more than the 2.42%. Bob, Jim has, and Susie have their hand up.
Okay, please, go ahead. Susie?
I looked at line 19, and that is administrator assessor, and it's got a 4.0 increase. So that at first I was confused about. I understand now the COLAs are in, but not the market alignment numbers. So what is that one? $926 up.
I will check that one. That could be the formula thing.
Okay.
What line is that, Susie?
It's line 19.
Right.
24056.
And line 9, Becky. Oh, sorry, Jim, you go first. You had your hand up.
Well, yes, line 151, the Recreation Committee. I'd like to propose we cut that from 3,000 to 1,000, considering that in 2021, they didn't even spend their $1,000. And I've been looking over the Recreation Committee's want list for the folks they want to hire. And boy, spending $1,000 on bringing someone down from Vermont to teach us all how to build stone walls. It just seems like if there is a group of people who really want to learn about stone walls, then I think they ought to come up with the money themselves to pay for that sort of expense. Maybe this seems kind of frivolous, but and then I looked over some of the other things. I just think that it's sort of an unproven, sort of fanciful kind of a thing. And in addition to that, they are also connected to the library. And if the library thinks it's really important, then they have funding that they might be able to support the Recreation Committee on. So I think that we ought to trim that back from 3,000 to 1,000.
Is this the time for us to be doing that with the budget, or?
Well, yes, if we don't do it now, it's
Why not?
Then
Sure,
You
we
should
should
make a
talk
motion.
about the lines.
you should
Yeah.
make a motion then.
well, then I make a motion to cut the Recreation Committee from 3,000 down to 1,000. Anybody second?
I'll second it. Any discussion about it?
Yes, we know that during COVID, most programs were not held. That's part of the reason that their previous budget wasn't spent. They have programs, the library gets grants for programs. This is taking off on creating programs that are outside the library, have certain different focuses, and it's asking the town for the money. So I support the $3,000 budget.
AJ,
I just also wanted to add, my understanding is that this is a committee that has had like vacancies in the recent history, but Becky, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, and that there wasn't a lot of activity, and that perhaps in sort of like going back, this was kind of a more robust committee with more robust programming, and that this, I think, represents an effort to to actually kind of create some kind of meaningful opportunities for town residents, adults, and youth. And so I think it's worth just kind of having that context in mind. I know it seems like a significant increase, but it's also, I think, true to say that there wasn't really a whole lot being done beforehand, and this reflects an effort to actually offer some good programming and some good experiences for the town.
George.
In our meeting with the Recreation Committee, she did mention that she was going to work closely with Mary Ann and had conversations with Mary Ann. So I'm not the librarian, so I'm not sure how much money the library really would have for this. I think she was asking, the Recreation Committee was asking for this because this is what they see as their expense. I think cutting it from 3,000 to 1,000 is just too much. So I wouldn't support it just because of the size. And I think AJ made some excellent points. I also agree.
Becky, you got something to say?
I was just gonna say, I think her reason for mentioning the library was they've been, picking Mary Ann's brain about how to put on successful programs, because Mary Ann has done a lot of work in that area, and knows where to look for grant money to do stuff. So I don't think the money's not going at all to the library.
I thought it was also about sort of advertising and outreach, and like using the systems that Mary Ann has for notifying the town about programming opportunities.
Yeah, and as figuring out how to to advertise, be successful, price points, what people, because Mary Ann's programs are almost all free to the public, which makes them available to the public.
And why shouldn't these programs be free to the public as well? I
And
don't.
that's their goal.
That's what we're voting on.
Oh,
You said you wanted towns members to pay for it. That would be the logical conclusion of voting
Well, no,
down, reducing this budget.
Well, they're not free if town taxpayers are.
The library has a programming budget, and that exists so that town residents can take advantage of programming at no cost to them. This is the same exact thing. You may not think that it's worth doing, but that's, I mean, it's totally analogous to what the library does.
I'm going to recognize myself to make a response to that. I personally think that a lot of this stuff, these programs at the library and a lot of the programs that are listed in this recreation committee proposal, I personally think that it's really superfluous and it only serves a small portion of our population. And I really think it's kind of like group daycare or something. It's very paternal. I don't really approve of it. I prefer people to have more independence and for us to run a leaner operation. That's my own personal viewpoint on it. I don't wish to participate in these things. I don't need to hire a consultant to tell me how to identify the trees in my woods, or to teach me how to build stone walls, or to teach me how to exercise, or any of those things. I have a library. I have access to the internet. I'm an avid and very literate person. I can read books to teach me about these things. I don't think that we can have enough money in a poor town like we live in to supply these kinds of services. They're superfluous and I don't support them.
There's one other aspect of this. The reason these are offered for free to the citizens is so that you can bring more people into participating and that the money isn't the reason that stops them. These programs are designed to bring people together, to share information, to share time, to become more identified in the community. That community feeling then spawns things like people volunteering to be on the FinCom and other ways that people see the town. So these are community building activities and they do not have a fee attached to them. Marianne gets a ton of grants to help pay for them. I think if this committee gets rolling, it too will be able to find some grants, but I think this is good seed money for creating more community.
Well, that's a very fanciful interpretation, Susie. But spending $1,000 for bird watching and mushroom identification, this is we probably have the talent here locally to do that without having to spend this kind of money. I just don't, and that would be very community building as well. Wildflower identification, there are plenty of people in town who I'm sure would like to get together and do all of this, but do we have to, we the finance committee and the town Shutesbury taxpayers have to spend this kind of money on doing it? I really think it's almost condescending. I think that we have the ability to do this ourselves without having to rely on this source of money. I just really am against this.
I believe George had his hand up. Is that right, George?
Yes. If I look at this budget, I would say maybe 20% of it affects me directly. Everybody has all kinds of needs in our town. This is about supporting the community as a whole. And the fact that the Recreation Committee has resurrected itself and is working on something like this, I think we give them a couple of years to figure it out. And yes, maybe in year one, it's 3,000. We talk to them next year and we see what it really costs. I don't think $3,000 for starting this up is such a bad idea. And I think in this year in particular, we've got it. So I just don't want to touch it. I don't want to decrease it by 2/3, that's for sure.
Shall we take a vote?
Yep.
Arbonitis. Oh, so the vote is.
To say first.
That's fine. No, we can vote.
So the motion on the floor is to decrease it from 3,000 to 1,000. Arbonitis, nay.
Right here, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Groves, aye.
Cashew, nay.
Mosier, nay. Tie vote.
So what does the tie vote signify, that it doesn't pass, or?
Yes.
Bring it up when Jim Walton's here again.
So we could revisit it some other time down the road or whatever. We don't make a recommendation.
Well, yeah, if it's
No,
a tie, then it doesn't pass.
It doesn't pass. Yeah.
Does not pass. Do we move on here?
Yeah, can we go to the very top and just go down in sections at a time? Because I do have a number of lines that I wanted to comment on, but I didn't necessarily want to jump all over the place.
I'm sorry, I was trying to highlight the
Oh, no,
big-
that's okay. No, that was the question somebody had, was about that line. But I was just thinking, I think if we go through this, I think we'll all have some questions as we roll, kind of like when we look at the expenses. One of my number one questions is, Becky, are you going to have somebody double check the longevity bonuses? Maybe Ryan, to make sure that he,
I've already asked Gail.
because I think we got hooked on that one last year. There was one in there that we shouldn't have had.
Yeah,
And, you know, none of us noticed that it was 2 years in a row, which of course a longevity bonus wouldn't be. But I didn't have anything else in this section myself.
okay. So. Okay, so the figure for the assistant town collector
That's
for
most-
next year, I know it's gonna be significant, you know, we needed what, $3,800 for for December through the end of the year, potentially without an increase to the salary. So this is a guesstimate. I've got to refine the figure. So we'll come back to that. But
Wait a
it
minute, you on
definitely
line
increased.
30? Where are you?
Yes.
Yes,
I'm on line
38.
38.
38.
Sorry, I'll say the
Becky,
number.
just a question about that line, please.
38.
This is just the way I think. If we're hiring an assistant town collector, then we're paying that additional money for a person who's an assistant, right? So why should that simply be added to the total cost of the town collector's office? I mean, doesn't it make it more efficient somehow? I mean, I don't see, if I had an assistant to do my work, I should be able to do my work more quickly. I don't, it seems like we always pay more and we never get any efficiency from any of these additional employees. I mean, do you get my point?
I hear your point. And that's why I have to look at how much it's costing for this year to make an adjustment, because Ryan is, he has been trained at this point. So he is gonna, when Ellen, she was out on vacation a week in February. Ryan stepped in for that week. She's gonna be out the end of March. Ryan is gonna work that week. So it's, you know, when she is not here, he will work 15 hours a week during those time periods. And if she were to get sick, he will cover then. So this really is, it's not like the assistant town clerk who had a set number of hours every week. It is more for a backup scenario and to have someone in place in case there needs to be, you know, someone, if she gets ill, or anything like that happens.
And in the past, when Ellen went on vacation or got sick, she came in and made up her hours. Her hours aren't, Becky, is it true she doesn't turn in a timesheet to submit weekly hours? It's that she gets the job done for a certain number of hours?
Yeah, because she's a 15-hour-a-week employee. She's never been paid benefits. I'm sorry, she doesn't get health insurance. She doesn't get vacation. And the requirement is that she get her job done. But at this point, she was out for 6 weeks 2 years ago. We didn't have someone to cover for her. That could have been a real mess. She started doing work at home after about 3 weeks. And the first 3 weeks, her husband came in and covered for her. We just got really lucky that he's a CPA, but it's not, I think, you know, we need to have someone who's learning the job. Ellen is not going to work forever. Although 50 years is going to feel like forever, but at some point she won't be working here. But until then, we need to have a competent person, and we do, and we're fortunate to have the training behind us and working towards, so that number might be a lot smaller than it is now because the training is complete. It's just unpredictable.
Right,
Line 44.
okay.
I'm talking about line, you want to go to 44, longevity?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope I'm not jumping the gun.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, that looks like that needs to be changed.
Oh, I gotta. This is the PDF.
It was right here on this page. I mean, there. Longevity bonus?
Yeah, but not every year. And the town clerk hasn't been around that long.
Right.
Thank you, George.
You're
That should
welcome.
be a brevity subtraction.
That's scary. All right, so I'm gonna, can you guys still see it or is it gone?
Still there.
Still there.
Oh, that amount?
The longevity bonus is still
Town clerk.
$300.
Yeah, it's still
And that
there.
was line 44, George?
Yes.
Yeah,
Good catch.
I'm just gonna switch to the active sheet. I wanted to be sure I was looking at what you were looking at, but I think this is anyway. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so 44, I deleted this.
Yeah.
Okay,
we ready for another one to talk about?
yeah,
Okay, on the Board of Registrars, which is lines 50 and 50. And 50 and 51. For one thing, is the state still increasing the minimum wage?
yes,
Yeah, so the wages wouldn't be the same. And so maybe Grace didn't think about that, or that number didn't get bumped, but if the state increases the minimum wage, then that number should reflect that. Expenses is where the payment for the election workers go. And then for some reason on line 50, it's +2. I don't know why.
I know.
that's the 2.42%.
But it only says 0.93 in the
Yeah.
0.93, so I thought it couldn't have been.
Yeah, okay. Page 62. Okay, I'll fix that one.
And check with Grace about bumping up for the minimum wage going up for expenses.
Okay. Anyone else?
Becky, on
line
line
60.
66, I think you said office equipment is laptops. Is that what that represents?
It's not just laptops, it's all printers and computers.
I was just looking at that line over time, and I thought it went down after we bought the new printer. Is that the case? I mean, when did we buy that printer?
Are you talking about the copier?
The copier, right?
So
Isn't that,
one-
isn't that part of the office equipment for the building or no?
no, because that was a single, it was a one-time expense.
I see.
I think we purchased it for $4,600 and we're under contract for all the toner
Uh-huh.
for the year and we produce like thousands, like 100,000 copies a year.
Okay, and the office
You've got a good deal.
supplies are the paper for that machine or?
Yep, they would include paper or,
Okay.
folders, any pens. The ones I don't get at the MMA conference, I bring
Good
back
job.
a basket for everybody.
I got 2 lines on the screen when you were ready.
Okay,
Line 60, it looks like we're not giving the custodian a raise.
that would be bad.
Place might get dirty.
Well, yeah, and I know why, I stopped there because he's been using up his hours and anyway, but so we need to make sure the rate COLA hits that. Thank you, George.
And how about line 68?
Fuel. Oh, that's gonna be a toughie.
What are we going to do to keep that flat?
Park the cars.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think we do have to.
Maybe a 5% increase.
The only saving grace is we underspent the line last year.
right.
We don't contract in advance, right? We're not,
Not for gas.
yeah.
Heating
And
oil,
not
we do though, right?
We do contracts. We go through a bid process with FERCog, but this year seems like a bad year to do it. Well, actually,
Well, it's always a
They
good
buy in
time to
bulk.
do it. It's just probably going to be more money.
Mhm.
Well,
right, but you can get caught if the prices come down, but.
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
Becky, what time of year do you contract out fuel oil? In the spring,
it's in-
summer, fall?
It'll go to the, unfortunately, the process has been in March and April.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's not too
Yeah.
good.
That's why I'm
So-
nervous about doing it this year.
Oh, we can always sue the Russians, I suppose.
That'll be.
There's a lot of people suing the Russians.
Yeah.
So what are you guys thinking? We'll go out to bid and hopefully have the bid back in time, but I'm not sure.
I think we should look at the bid and then maybe do a little homework and see if it makes sense to roll the dice and hold off on the contract. If we anticipate that fuel prices will moderate, over the summer. I mean, it might be something worth, or maybe even hedge the bet, just contract a certain amount and then contract the rest and split it in 2 or something, just to try to avoid making a bigger mistake.
Well-
I think that kind of strategy might work.
Well, usually
And I
those,
know The select board so it kind of falls under the select board's purview, because they're in charge of contracts, and we have been contracting for less than we anticipate having, just because of those kind of trends when the price might be dropping, or when the price is starting to rise, I'll contract for more to catch the early section, the earlier pricing, the lower pricing.
I like Bob's idea. I do think that we should put something in here now, like we did with the trash hauling, just so that when we're looking at the bottom lines, we know that we're accounting for something here. If we thought it was going to go up 10% or 20%, but then moderate, which we're all hopeful it will, because we know that we're living in a spike right now, or getting close to a spike. So maybe for a quarter of the year or a half the year, it's up 10%. So we add, like Susie said, 5%, or we could add 10% if we think it's gonna be 20 for 6 months, just something so we have a placeholder, so we have a better idea of what our surplus or deficit is.
Oh, you said we had $8,000 left over from last year, or 7, Becky?
Did you look at the budget?
Yeah,
Expenses.
How much is
Expense report?
left over?
I'm just looking at the numbers in front of us. I thought I saw a dip there of 7
Right,
or 8.
right. So the actual for, was that 21?
Yes.
Yeah. month-
Okay, so
you're
the
good
actual
to day
for
21.
21 was like $7,000 less.
So we have that as a hedge right now. If we just maintain the budget, that we have $7,000 to cushion whatever increase.
Well,
that's-
currently, the
that's
current
20%.
balance is 13,000. And that's through the first week in March. So we're almost 75% of the way through. And we've got,
Yeah, if you took a third of it, it'd be 7,000. So 28,000 is the trend. So I mean, Bob's point is valid. I mean, that's really $6,000 buffer that we have.
So I think we should leave it there right now. I think that's probably a reasonable thing to do, don't you?
yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
yeah, because we have 38% balance by these figures, and we have about 40% left of the year, so.
But Becky, you'll still follow through and see.
Yeah, we'll just see how things go in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. See what happens with the war.
God, I'm not looking forward to it.
I think on line 36, the town collector's COLA isn't in there, or did we talk about that and I didn't understand? Line 36.
Well, that line's going to change anyways because of our vote earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, but just notice that there's no COLA there.
Town
36.
clerk?
36. Town collector.
Collector.
Okay. Well, that would be bad. Right. Thank you, Susie.
Speaking of, do we have the COLA increases for our unionized employees kind of built into this, or is that something we're still waiting on?
It still has to happen.
Okay, that's there's no
But we
update on
have the
that yet.
figure. It's a 3%.
Okay, and has that been implemented here in this budget?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet.
Rough idea what that might add up to, Becky? Or is that
3% of 128.
3% of 128,000?
Yeah. So it'll be $3,840.
Yeah, sorry, $3,800, yeah.
Yep, that's what I have.
Okay. Good questions. Keep them coming.
Are we on the next page yet?
I think so. Halfway there.
One other question on line 130, which is the trash. If we did go to the side, we don't save anything on trash bags, do we? Because we still have trash bags going in those new fancy containers, right?
Right.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
The trash bags are part of this number that's in there.
Can we go
Trash
back up though?
bags are in the recycling number
Oh, I see.
in a separate fund.
All
They're
right.
not in there. Trash bags are paid for between grant funds and the revenue from people buying trash bags.
But I get 50 of them every year, don't I? I mean,
Yeah, you get 50 free. And
well, where are they
then,
in the budget?
what?
Where are they in the budget? Where's the money for that 50 in the budget? That just paid for?
They are paid for by other people running out of trash bags.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The money isn't in the budget, it's in the recycling revolving fund.
Okay.
And
Could we
so
go
it's
back-
the recycling coordinator's salary.
Could we go back up?
Yeah, what number?
I want to go to education. I wanted to ask about, had
Okay,
you
so
heard
that's
from,
down.
oh, that's down? Oh,
What number?
I don't know, because there we go. Oh,
Slash
actually, well, then
108.
let's go up to fire, because I wanted to talk about fire first. So I saw something about the recommendation of the committee that was analyzing the fire chief. Oh, actually, it came up in a personnel board meeting. And one of the conversations was, one of the things that they were evaluating was the skill set of the fire chief. And I thought I heard that we are going to be looking for a fire chief that has very close to the same skills as the current fire chief, mechanically speaking.
No, that's not
Okay.
the recommendation.
Okay. So I was looking at that maintenance line, and I'm wondering if we really need to go the whole $11,000.
Oh. Just to
Yeah,
respond to that, I think what I pointed out, when we had our discussion with Walter and he made that recommendation, he said, I'm not going to be around to do this, and you need to put this in the budget to cover what I do now. My point was, if we have to pay for it, then we shouldn't be paying for it as part of the next higher salary. If we're paying you to do that now and the next person doesn't do it, then that should be reflected in their compensation. It shouldn't cost the town anymore. I mean, that seems to be logical to me. I don't know if that's what the committee, I don't know who's studying the salary structure for this position when it's advertised, but that's how I would look at it. At least seems to make sense to look at it that way.
I also think that Walter was ballparking that number, as of course he would. But I have no idea what other towns are paying to maintain their vehicles, and vehicles are all different ages. But I wonder if we can get some sense of what other towns are paying to maintain their fleet.
I don't know how I just wanted to say that I think that Walter did also mention, and I think somebody else, maybe it was Becky, maybe it was somebody from the highway, that there was a highway department employee last year that was doing some work on the fire department's equipment too. And we were paying for that somehow. Maybe we're paying for our highway department funds. I don't know. But there was some work being done other than that being done by Walter on the equipment that was covered by our budget. So
Bob, just on that point, I know that Chuck had advised Walter on some things, but he didn't act, and he was gonna try to help on a project, but it also needed a lift. So I don't think that Chuck actually ever worked on any fire department
I
equipment.
guess I got that wrong. I thought that's what you told me, but in any case, I do think that we should be, if you're not going to find another Walter Tibbetts, a guy who lives in town and who has the kind of skills that Walter had. So we have to look at what a reasonable expectation is for the next person and pay them an appropriate salary. And also, we also have to anticipate that our equipment has to be maintained. So how we arrive at that number, who decides on the number? I don't know. We don't decide how the job description, who does the personnel board do that?
I'm sorry, I have to go. Good night, everybody.
Right,
Good night,
Melody.
Melody.
George, does that personnel department have any responsibilities there?
well, we're gonna, April is our representative on the committee, I forget what it's called, the fire search committee. And no, she said, we haven't seen the job description. So I can ask her at the next meeting. She did talk about it, and they're going to be advertising the job. So we're probably a little behind on that. One of the things that we,
George, you
Yes.
guys reviewed it at the last meeting. It just for a little bit, but she brought up the issues that came out of the meeting.
yeah, that's where I got the impression about the maintenance. I thought she said that the job description essentially wasn't changing.
Well, their maintenance isn't in the job description.
And doesn't maintenance include the building, not just the fire trucks?
Walter did do a lot, some maintenance on the building.
I'm sure.
Can I make a request that from the FinCom that you and Melody look into this and report to us? I suppose that, I don't know when you meet next, if you'll have an opportunity to do that, but it would be good for us to have more detailed information, I think.
Yeah, and I'll admit, Bob, I was making an assumption because when April told me that the job description was the same, I made the assumption that the maintenance was in the job description. So that's why I made the comment I made earlier. So I think at this point, what we should do is get our hands on the job description.
Yeah.
And remember, there is another component the personnel board guy is talking now, and that is we're going to find out what the market pays. You know, we're going to negotiate with whoever we make a job offer to, and we're going to see what the salary ranges are. In fact, I hope that whoever's involved in that process is going to be looking at the wage and salary summary from the FERCog.
AJ, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I believe Walter was recommending an increase of between $7,000 and $11,000 to this line. So one thing we could potentially do just to be a little conservative would be to drop that number down to 18,000, which I think is still within the range of what he was anticipating, you know, would need to be bumped up, you know, because of this issue.
I like that idea.
I pulled up his budget and, you know, document, and yeah, it says for maintenance and the FY23 request, it was a range of 18 to 22,000.
Yeah,
So
that's a fact.
so we could, yeah. If
I
folks
would like
think
to
it
see
makes
get
sense,
some more
we could, yeah.
information that wouldn't,
Yeah.
for us to settle on a number that we want to recommend. I think we do need more information from the job description, and, you know, maybe just to come to a better understanding of what we're dealing with. So can we pass on this? The committee
Yeah,
happy with
that seems
that?
reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
good idea.
Yep. Sure. And Becky, the regional school, you sent us an email talking about the requirement that the EDD be spent on the operating budget, and they had 280 in the operating budget, but I think the new EDD is like 440 something, so it looked like there was a pretty big increase there. Had you heard what the decision was?
From what I understand so far is there's going to be, I think there's $442,000 that has to be removed from the E&D and applied to the FY22, this current year's budget. And when that happens, the practice has always been that when that amount is divvied up by the regional assessment and returned to the towns. So if Shutesbury's about 9–10% of the budget, I would anticipate like $44,000 not being assessed to the town. So there'll be a balance left in the regional school budget that will, I believe, will end up going to free cash.
Free cash?
And there's not going to be a recalculation for FY23.
Not, he did, Doug did not mention that.
Okay.
I want to ask a question about 108, line 108. Are we going to see another version of the school budget from June 28 or from the school committee?
They did vote on something. I requested a copy, but Dan wanted to be sent to the FinCom, and so I don't know if Jim Walton got that. Those numbers are a little, I need to meet with Becky and maybe then we'll talk to Caitlin. It really isn't an increase of only 12,000, but it all has to do with what number you say was in FY22, and then the FY23 proposal. There's a couple of different ways to look at it. Some are about with grants in and with grants out. So that number, the number 2,250,000 blah is a number amongst all the numbers. So I think that that's probably a safe projection, but there's other ways to look at this, and it's been because we had two different bookkeepers with different ways of reflecting the grants. I feel like this is not the number on line 108 for 12,869 needs to be investigated. So that's why this is a draft.
Right. I just want to reiterate what you're saying. I guess I personally would like to see this.
Okay, I apologize. Buried in an email from her. I think I have it.
Okay, so that'll get
So
adjusted
just,
and
you could
I'll
distribute
find
that,
it.
then we can look at this line once we have more information, right?
Right. Right.
So
And I wanted to talk about 109. Did we get, has there been a final regional school number? Because talk about working out the guardrails looks like that's why it's 4% decrease and not more, which some of the columns had a bigger decrease. So is this the final number from them, given what they wanted to include in the assessment?
Yes, because it's of their guardrail.
That looks
Okay.
like it, with 4% on the money, on the
Okay.
money, right?
Okay, I just wanted, and so it was a 5% rolling, 5-year rolling average, 100%, and then the guardrails.
Yeah, and the guardrail was 4%, just like on the COLA.
Which COLA?
The COLA for the town employees this year, it came in almost 6%. But because the
right, has a
original
guardrail.
policy had a
Got it.
guardrail 4% was used.
well, hopefully the other towns will say, we don't like the guardrail, our dear, and then that number becomes lower by 40,000. Not likely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that, hopefully that'll mean when you get the formula, will there still be more money coming,
FY 24, we'll have a $40,000 credit going into that year's budget, because even if they do put in the guardrail at 4%, that the difference is $40,000, it would be more like 3%. So we know that our assessment is going to go down next year if the budget stays the same.
Right.
And it's a 5-year rolling, so the differences aren't going to be material in terms of, the equity and the population piece. So we're pretty much got a $40,000 credit in advance of next year. I'm sure the expenses will go up and it'll get cut into, but this should be a decrease in this line again next year.
or
George,
it'll be at worst case 0, hopefully.
so
Yeah.
George, just so I'm clear on this, what you're saying is that the 5-year rolling average will maintain our, what we've gained from this transition to the full statutory.
Yeah.
Because that will be averaged into the 5 years hence.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of this 5-year rolling is we can pretty
Right.
much count on small changes. And we know that we're not getting the full benefit of the 100% because of the guardrail this year. But that difference is below the guardrail. So next year we'll get the rest of it.
We'll get benefit of it from next year, from this year.
Yes.
From this,
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, so we don't lose it. It's just bumped.
It
for
doesn't
next
go
year.
away.
we
Yeah,
don't
I mean, we
lose.
lose it this year because they went to 100%, we didn't get it. But on the other hand, we asked them for 85%. We're getting something that's closer to 95%. So
Mhm.
it's a win-win as far as I'm concerned.
So the amount above the 4% gets carried over so that we can make use of it
Doesn't
in the
get carried
future?
over, but it gets, when we recalculate next year, if the budget was the same, then our assessment at 100% would be, I'm going to throw out 1507, 1.507, not 1.547. Next year, when they recalculate it, if everything stayed the same, next year it would be 1507, because coming from this year to next year, that difference would be below the 4%.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
I see.
we're not going to get this $40,000 back, but next year our assessment will decrease by 40,000, all things being equal.
It does go
Su-
away.
Susie, do we know whether our grade school population 1 through 6 is fairly even from grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whether we will have a big upward blip like Pelham did, when they suddenly had a whole bunch of students and that threw off. That's what made their contribution so expensive. I was just wondering how our student population is numerically through grades 1 through 6 in our elementary school.
I'll ask that, but we're also in a COVID time and the population
Yeah,
numbers are skewed.
Yeah, I know it's a problem, but
I'll
I
ask
was
them
curious.
to-
I was curious to know if there was any trends that anyone had noticed one way or another as to whether a lot more kids are showing up that we didn't have before, and that our numbers, population numbers for the school actually begin to rise instead of fall.
I'll ask.
Thank you.
Becky might know.
Well, I was just, and I probably, you already know, but with 23 births in FY '22 in Shutesbury, above a regular maybe 10,
13.
we are looking, I believe a lot of the new homes that sold in the last few years went to young people starting families. And some of these, are, have older siblings, and some are, having younger siblings already. So it appears that there might be a population growth spurt in
Yeah.
Shutesbury coming.
I have a question on line 114, the long-term bonds, they're going up. I thought bonds kind of go down over time.
No, this is the school debt. And so if you remember the debt schedules for the region's capital payments,
Yeah,
they add in different programs. This is
Okay.
the
Different
line
items.
yeah.
drops in would be 237,000.
Yeah, like that track, for example.
Well, that's not going to kick in FY '23 at all.
I know,
No.
but
Is there any
things like
report
that.
on that? Have they done any work about a proposal there? Do you know, anyone?
I
The
don't,
newspaper's been reporting on efforts to look at the financing and try to bring in as many operating pieces as possible. They are clearly considering the proposal for artificial, and that raises the price tag, and how do they get a way to buffer that for towns. They are talking about doing fundraising for $1 million. And I can't remember. So that's in the newspaper. Take it for what it's worth when it gets into the newspaper. But they're clearly concerned about it, and they're looking at a presentation to us, which will come, as far as I can tell, it's going to come this spring to us. But that doesn't mean it will impact FY '23. And we will need to have, I mentioned at the last meeting, I need somebody to give me a careful explanation of what they're proposing relative to using CPA money and thirds of this and thirds of that. So, but they're clearly considering the artificial turf, because in the newspaper it said the season for use is much longer than the wet field problems they've been having, and maintenance is a consideration, and durability. So, but they are also considering how to manage the price.
Excuse me, I think, is it likely that we will not be voting on this at town meeting this year? Will there be anything for us to recommend up or down to town meeting this year on this subject?
Well, that's the question I also have, is how does a capital project like this, who are the deciders, and what's the process for that decision? I mean, if we are going to invoke using CPA money, I don't think that can be in FY '23, although I did talk to Al Hansen, and he said, the season for doing the proposals is already done. Doesn't mean there couldn't be done at a special town meeting, or maybe even done for this year's town meeting. But we have to have a warrant article from the regional school if it's going to be applying for the CPA funds. So I think it's pretty complicated. So to me, it looks like it can't get here in FY '23. And I don't know what part we have, what role the town has in approving or not approving a capital
Hmm.
project from the region.
The reason I raised the question was, I think we should move on to things that we definitely have to deal with in this budget. Because I don't know if we're gonna be dealing with that item in our budget. And so
Well-
let's wait for some more information and pass on that.
Bob, I would like to make one comment about it though, and that is we are going to be looking at capital requests in one of our upcoming meetings. And we're going to have to talk about how we're going to fund the requests. And I think we do need to look into the distance to see what the impact of this track is going to have on our finances, because we want to make sure we finance in such a way that we're in a position to be able to do that, or the best position. So I agree with what you're saying. No need to talk about it now, but we do need to definitely take it into account when we're looking at our capital purchases.
Sounds good. So let's move on this draft. Any other questions? We have one more page, is that it?
Well, my next question is on the next page, and that is the debt service while we're on the subject. And that is, will the culvert, we had voted last year, the town approved financing, I think it was 200,000 something. And I'm wondering if we're going to have debt service for the culvert in FY23.
I don't believe we will, because construction, we would have anticipated it, having it in FY23 if it was done in FY22. So I anticipate the debt for FY23.
Becky, are the contractor, which is MAS Construction, have they agreed to hold their original pricing for the culvert? Is that
Yeah.
it's not gonna change, so we aren't gonna get socked because it's been delayed for
Not
a year.
unless something changes that I don't know about.
Yeah, all
This
right.
happens at low water during the summer, is that it?
But we still haven't moved the pole, right? I mean,
Well,
they
the
reconnected
pole
the
hasn't been
fixture.
moved, but the overhead power line has been severed, so that's a big deal. And they kind of screwed up on their notification to everyone around the lake about power being cut off temporarily while they make that change. But no matter, they've made the change and they've done that. So now it's just a pole moving operation, which is pretty simple.
Yeah, we just need them to remember to come back.
Yeah.
Well, can we send a tree warden and have it taken down?
Yeah, that's right. It's got a chainsaw.
Yeah. Well, it's got our fiber on it though, so we want them to
Oh,
be very
okay.
careful
Yeah,
about our fiber.
Oh, we're not done. Okay, the pole's not free and
MLP
clear.
is very concerned about this pole move.
Oh, okay. I think that's everything I had.
It's everything. So
Anybody else?
Yes, so one thing I did was I was tracking the changes we made. And so the deficit, it looked like the surplus we have, that the amount we won't have to raise was 88,713. And now I'm estimating it to be around 80,000 at this point. I know there's other stuff, but just so everybody knows, I was kind of tracking it on the side.
What
So
are you saying, George?
So I took this 89,013
Yeah.
and I added the 24,000 for the salary alignment, and then I subtracted the tree warden and a couple other things we did, and I come in at around 80. So that number went down, but not by a lot.
Okay.
Now, you'll probably have some other things. I think the elementary school, you said you've got a new number, so I don't know.
Well, I
about
just
those.
looked, I couldn't forward it to you because I made that mistake before. It only goes to FinCom. From my phone, I can't send it to you guys individually because that group is on my computer. But I just checked the figure and it's the same friggin' figure. It hasn't.
That's what's on the
changed.
budget they gave us.
And that's even on the 217 budget.
Right, but I think that the, what you call, so I think what you called for 2022's number, it isn't really just an increase of 12,000. 869, but we'll talk about that, but I do think you have the right number.
Susie, they show FY 22 as 2,197,491.
the actual,
I gotta come up and see numbers with you because A, I didn't get the one you just got, and B, there's
Okay.
a zillion numbers. And I'm glad to see that the number in your, it feels clear to you that the budget is 2,250,948.
Well, that's
And
what it says, but I don't have any confidence in last year, the FY '22 that's being represented.
Right, and so the change is different. That's all I'm saying.
But if they, I believe they applied grant money,
Mhm.
and that's the difference. So in the end,
The part the town is on the
even if-
hook for is.
Yeah, so
is
even
the
if-
number.
even if their number is lower for FY '22 than ours is.
Yeah.
They supplemented it with grant money, so it doesn't really, it would reduce what they should assess us this year.
Yeah,
Or
so.
we have money back in free cash.
Yeah, so I need to sit with you and look at this, but
We,
I agree that in the bottom line for FY '23, when we look at what we gotta put together, we should be using the 2,250,000 number.
Okay.
we are not, I don't think we should be voting on that number until we see a detailed budget that we can approve and recommend. That's-
And I can send this to you.
Oh, we have that.
as soon as
We have
the
it.
meeting's
We
over.
have the one that they.
The last budget I got was the PowerPoint presentation that didn't make any sense.
That's
Yeah,
not the
don't be,
budget,
don't be worried, because the beginning, the first page of this looks like that with a graph, but it's not.
Okay, well,
I thought we
please
got them both
send
at the
that
same
to me,
time.
as I don't have it, okay? Thank you. So we're gonna move on to revenue now? Is that, are we done with this part?
for now.
Fugit.
Okay. So things, I verified my numbers. I know George had some questions. And I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer them tonight, but as you all know, the process, here we get the property tax levy limit total from the adding our previous levy. Then we take 2.5% and then we add new growth. And I'm starting with FY '22 actual to show you, we were pretty darn close in our proposal. We were off by $8,000, $9,000.
More
So
new growth.
then, I'm sorry?
More new growth.
Yes, there was more new growth than we estimated. And then we have increased the total value like we anticipated. We were going to increase it. The final was 242 million. And this levy ceiling figure is predetermined by DOR. Where I reach for my sheets. And I will get these all out to you. So DOR sends out sheets that determine levy limits. And they go forward from the prior year. So in FY '22, they showed a levy limit of, okay, so this is what was weird, and I've never seen before. The levy ceiling was 6,073,000. And usually when they carry the number forward into the outer column, the FY '22 limit, it usually remains the same number. But because of our closeness to $25 per thousand, that number was cut at 5,809,753 as the set levy limit, which you'll see down. Okay, so we had that up there. That's our growth. Then we had the levy ceiling that I put in the 6 million, and I will verify this with DOR because it could be that they want me to ignore that number, but it's on their sheet. And then we add in our debt excluded, and we come up with 5,841,391. Now that amount is listed on the recap. So you can go back to your recap sheet and find the figure. Here we go. Here's the recap sheet. And you'll remember at the bottom of the recap sheet, the must equal 1C figure. Okay, so that I'm ahead of myself. So the must equal, this is the one from the recap sheet. This is the maximum allowable levy, is the 5,841,000. And that is also goes back to the levy limit sheet. So our math is working out okay. We have our maximum levy limit. Then when we determine our budget, we set the excess levy capacity to back into it and came up with in agreement with our recap sheet at 5,303,470. So we're just carrying that process forward for FY23. And, you know, we'll be adjusting the excess levy capacity as we zero in where the budget's going to fall in. So it's like if I was trying to get ready for town meeting today, I would make the gap 0. So you would basically take what we're underspent on the expense sheet. Say we are underspent 100,000, you would add that to the excess levy capacity. That would subtract it out. And when we ran through all our state figures, our cherry sheet, our assessments for school choice and charter and air pollution, the local estimated receipts, we'd come up with our final budget number that would equal our expense amount.
Becky, just one other piece of that. If you scrolled up to the new revenue line,
New growth, what line are you talking?
oh, now I can see it.
Number 25, he's asking about.
Yes, so then that number would also go down by 100,000, right? In your example.
So if that number goes up,
Because we wouldn't need $100,000 of the 25% increase.
so if we increase the excess levy capacity, it would go, the new levy, the new tax revenue would go down by 100,000.
Yes, that's my point.
Yeah.
And the reason I make that point is so everybody understands that line 2, the 145,000 from the 2.5% increase would be offset by the 100,000 increase in the excess levy capacity. So new growth from that line would end up being $45,000. In other words, we're not taxing, in the example you gave, we're not taxing everybody the full 2.5% that we
Right.
could on a majority vote. Now it's just going to be, in your example, it would essentially be $45,000 of the 145.
Right.
I hope I'm not confusing people, but I think that's an important thing for us all to understand.
Well, I understand your theoretical points, but what about the real budget? Do we have any basis for saying what those numbers will be now? In terms of what excess levy capacity is going to be used and how much levy?
No, I'm just talking conceptually so that we
I know, that's
understand
why
how
I'm
this model
confused. I'm
works.
trying to think about in practical terms, what it means for these numbers.
No,
What do
our
we know now?
draft- our
So
draft
Bob,
is pretty
if you look,
undone.
I'm sorry, Susie.
I'm just saying our draft is too far not complete to begin to project that number.
Right, what we have today is about 80,000, not 100,000.
Right. Okay, so that's where whatever gap comes up, when we finish a budget, if we have a gap, we can adjust these numbers in terms of what money we need to raise.
Correct.
That I understand. That is math I understand. So whatever gap, whatever, we have revenue projections in our budget that what we just looked at, and those revenue projections were just starting point. There was a place for you to start. But if we don't need to raise all that money, we change these numbers.
Right. Which we've been actively doing. That's why the tax increase was, that's how we keep it as small as possible.
But you started off by assuming the max 2.5% under Proposition 2.5%.
Right, which we have to do by law. And because you can't track the excess levy capacity if you don't do that. It doesn't mean that we have to tax that 2.5. It means we have to track it.
And on town floor, we should explain to everybody that we're not necessarily raising their taxes by $145,000, even though that's what it looks like.
Yep.
Hey, that's where it gets tricky to explain this excess levy capacity line, because we don't, in Becky's example, that 100,000, it's not gonna be on any line on column L.
Right.
It's not gonna be on its own on any line on column L where we can see it.
Right. You will be able to see it as a change from
Yeah.
the year before.
Column O.
Yeah.
And we just have to make reference to it on town floor.
Yeah.
So we have to visit this again as we hone the numbers down.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping we can visit some of these estimates down low and maybe get some new information to raise some of those. That would be nice, but I guess I'm being hopeful.
So I have a question. When we just talked about where it might show up on this sheet when we're trying to explain it. So if I'm looking at line 20, or maybe I should be looking at line 23 instead because there's an adjustment. Fine, I'll look at 23. Can I look at what column K says and column L says and say that that is the difference in that year of the levy increase?
You mean if you subtract K from L, that would be the difference for that year of like the $24,000?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not going to a hypothetical, just saying, is that where I see the change in the tax increase from?
It's L and M.
No, actually, I need to look at line column J to column L on line 25. I mean, line 23.
Okay, so all the new tax revenue is trying to tell you is that new money has become available, and if it's not added to excess levy capacity, it's being used. So like, even though we reduced the excess levy capacity, we still didn't really increase very much last year.
You know what would be really cool on this schedule? And I don't want to create work, but if below new tax revenue, there were 4 lines that broke it out between the 2.5, the new growth, and the excess levy and the debt exclusion. So people could see it goes up 160,000. How much is it because of their taxes? How much is coming from new taxpayer property? And how much of it is to cover the debt exclusion? I'm not, it's just, I think that might be an easier way to show it, or an easy way to
But I
do.
think George, I think what people are really wanting to know is what tax rate will that figure generate for me? And how does it compare to last year?
No.
And we don't have that tax rate on here. Is that something we talked about?
But we
having?
could, I could add that because we have the tax, we have the total tax levy and we have an estimate, well, for this year, if you divided this into that, it would give you the tax rate. This would be a total guesstimate for this coming year, but I think it would give you something, practical to compare to.
Just one thing about that, and that is that makes sense too. But now that I'm thinking about it, we have the finance annual report. And Susie, if I remember correctly, we put all that information on that. So the suggestion I just made is probably would be better served using the report that the finance committee summarizes,
Yeah.
uses to make its presentation.
I want to echo that. I think that this accounting method, you do not want to have it in the report on this, because this is guaranteed to make everybody vomit,
It's a
really
quagmire.
confusing. And it's also not necessary to tell people, we could be taxing you more. No, just tell me what you're taxing me and tell me what the bill is. Because the excess levy capacity thing it makes it much more complicated to do the calculation this way. And okay, if the state says we have to do it, we have to do it, but we don't have to share it. Share the results of it. It's a public document, of course, but still, it's confusing.
Very confusing, but people have asked about it. It has been talked about in pretty much every annual town meeting for the last 5 years.
Yeah. So
We'll
I don't
make
know.
sure it's on the report.
It's 8:39, and I have a sort of a half-life that was reached a while ago, in terms of my mind being somewhat sharp, but what other things do we want to put this aside now and move on to something else and maybe think about finishing up tonight and scheduling another meeting?
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'm done
I
with
think,
that.
I don't know what else. I looked at the agenda. Next thing they said, four town meeting recap. I don't know if we have to do that. But maybe we should do committee reports, because there might be something of interest there for everybody to share. And so, AJ, do you want to tell them what we were up to, or?
Well, I wanted to ask about the OPEB.
Oh, the
item.
OPEB. Do we have something there?
Yes, I have Parker Elmore scheduled for the next meeting. And I just received a whole bunch of documents that I will forward to you as soon as I figure out what, 3 of them were just PDFs of nothing. So I'm just going through them, making sure they're all documents, and I will send those out tomorrow to everybody. But Elmore Parker will be here for the next meeting. So that's on our next agenda.
Is that March 22nd?
Yes.
Our schedule?
So we have some homework to do for the next meeting. We have to study.
Yeah, good.
So, good.
So we're going to schedule that discussion on our agenda for next meeting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You'll send us the documents.
Yeah.
Excellent. So in capital planning, we're having a meeting. It's coming up, not this week, but next week, right?
March
Right.
16th.
Yes. And we'll be just voting on it, on all the requests, I believe. And we're also going to, so that will be a cruiser, a car for the fire department, also the police
Dump
department are asking for signs, electronic signs. The highway department has requested a new truck, a dump truck and body. And that we had the school roof, and we've done some work on the engineering, and we'll have some information to provide the committee, Becky and myself, about the cost of that engineering, and we're going to be, and I don't know what else is on our agenda besides those items.
On the Vadar.
The Vadar is right.
System
This is the
requested
software
by the
for the
finance.
accountant and the treasurer. Both,
And
right?
the
Yes.
library.
The library, we don't know because we don't know what the result of the grant application is. So that's a possibility that they'll be making a request, but it's pending whatever deliberations are going on.
At the
Boston.
MDLC, and
Yeah.
that's
We're gonna hear soon.
supposed
I
to be
think
done
the
by
end
the
of this month.
15th.
Yeah, so the capital planning should know for their meeting.
Okay. So what about your committee, Jim Hemingway? You presented
No,
last.
no, nothing. Last week, I think brought you pretty much up to date. If anybody has any questions, I can answer them, but there's nothing new to report.
Anything else? George, personnel, we're up to date on you.
Yeah, sure are.
Well, all right. When's our next meeting?
March 22nd.
22nd.
March 22nd.
Oh, 22nd?
Yeah.
So today's the 8th,
Yeah.
Mhm.
22nd. So what's that, a Wednesday?
No, it's a Tuesday. That's a Tuesday.
Tuesday, right?
Oh, 14 and 8. Let me see.
Sucks.
We've gone too long.
I was right. The brain's not working.
Oh, I at the next meeting, I'd like on the agenda, the timeline, given that we know our town meeting's on May 21st.
Okay.
What tasks are left to do and what days, what meetings will do them.
That sounds like a good idea.
And tied with that, we definitely need to know what our drop dead date is for the warrant article.
Bob, I guess, are we gonna bring the recommendations from the capital planning committee?
Yeah, I guess
to
we should. Huh?
that meeting and potentially vote on them?
On the 22nd,
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Is it gonna, should we be doing that on that date or what's the other agenda items for that night?
OPEB, the timeline, Susie was just. ready.
and I'm just concerned because there's 7 capital requests or 6. Is it 6 or 7?
Well, my philosophy is that we should put it on the agenda and see if we get to it. And we shouldn't be, we shouldn't feel that we're obligated to do everything. If we're not done, we just recess and we pick it up where we left off.
I guess the problem
sense.
is when you involve other people like Parker's, you'd probably want to have him go first. And then the other folks will just, it could get pretty late.
I don't really see, I don't see dealing with all those questions in one night with the other agenda items we have.
All the
Yeah.
capital items, you
Yeah.
mean? So we could split them.
Yeah, it might be a two-parter.
We also have recommendations from a committee, and I want to respect that process. I don't know that I'll have a whole lot of questions. How we allocate, that's the FinCom's job, where the funds come from. So that's a big piece for us.
Right? Isn't that was my understanding. The capital plan, you folks on the capital planning committee will decide which ones are going to be funded and come to us, and we need to figure out how we're going to pay for them.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
but I guess eventually, George, I mean, these are gonna turn into warrant articles, right? And we're I guess at that point, as a committee, we're gonna have to vote on whether to recommend passage of those articles, right? So
Okay.
that's a good way to look at it. I agree.
The finance committee.
So it's a clean process where capital planning presents, FinCom accepts, determines funding, warrant articles get written, and then the finance committee votes on those articles.
It sounds like a long agenda item. If there's 7
It
articles.
won't
we're gonna
happen
have to
all in
figure out how
one
to find-
time.
Well, you wouldn't
Yeah.
have the votes on the same day, but you would want to have the presentation and putting together the funding sources. But you don't have to if you're doing it for everything.
Well, for me, looking at that many items, you're going to have to look at them all as a whole because you're looking at how you're financing and it affects how much debt you can take, how much cash you can use, what's the
That's a
best
good
cash
point,
source.
yeah.
So at the end of the conversation, I think we have to look at it all together and break it into the right places.
Let me just make a suggestion here, see if this makes sense. We look at all the items that passed through the capital planning and came to us at our next meeting. And then we schedule the hearing. We split it in two pieces or whatever we think is reasonable. So
What
we
do you
have,
mean schedule the hearing?
in other words, we're not going to vote on any of those things. We're not going to vote on how those are funded at our next meeting, but we're going to review them and then see the big picture, as George points out, about what kind of money we're talking about.
Okay,
Then have the hearing where you say the people who are going to present to us, say Walter or Tim or somebody. Is that what you're saying, Becky?
well,
They've
They
no,
already
because
presented to
once
capital.
once
Yeah.
they're
Okay, so the-
approved by capital, they have to go on the warrant. You just have to figure out the funding.
Right, so that it shouldn't be that long a process, but we should be able to look at the whole thing without it being a very lengthy process.
That would be nice.
And then if we
So-
can't finish, we can't finish.
I guess the alternative, Bob, is just a little bit of a tweak on your suggestion, is what if on the 22nd, you and I just reviewed the recommendations of capital planning, provided some background information about each of the items. We basically report to the committee those details, and then at our following meeting, we can have any discussion and then votes on each of those items.
I think
But
that's,
at least that would give people at least a couple of weeks to sort of absorb the information on what capital planning is recommending.
I think it's an excellent idea. I think it's a good suggestion. So we'll plan on doing that.
Okay,
That makes
just
sense.
for my
Committee?
clarification, AJ, for the next agenda on the 22nd, we'll say that capital planning, which is you and Bob, and maybe Ellen will be there, will report on the projects.
Right. And we'll just go through all of the capital requests that are being recommended or by the capital planning committee, provide a little bit of background and some numbers and details on each of those. But we won't have, kind of deliberations and voting until the following meeting.
And you'll have numbers, prices, or ballpark prices?
Yeah,
Yes.
so the following meeting will be,
April 5th. Or if needed, we can do sooner.
okay, so, okay,
Could
and
be
it's
the
at that
29th.
meeting. Okay, so at which meeting will you look at the whole big picture? That's where I'm fuzzy,
The
sorry.
next meeting.
April 5th.
Okay, so April 5th will be the big picture and voting.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just because I have to fill, if I know Susie will too, but Jim will be asking.
Now,
Yeah. So just one last thing on this. So I think it's going to take a little discipline on the part of the committee on March 22nd to not get into an extensive debate about the worthiness of these projects. I think, we can hold on that until the following meeting. I think on the 22nd, we really should just go through the details of what capital planning is recommending. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, your job is to figure out how to finance them.
How to fund them? Yeah.
Yeah, once they're
we'll-
passed by capital, they go on the warrant.
So we'll be educated and prepared to do that in the subsequent meeting.
Right. And you'll get the big picture, like you were saying, George, about kind of what the sort of total needs, capital needs are going to be.
Yeah, how it fits
And-
together.
We should have information on the library project by then. That'll impact the big picture, one way or the other.
That's
World.
a huge question mark.
right, so is there anything else before I ask to adjourn the meeting? I need a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second,
Okay, I will have a vote, I guess. Is that what?
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew eye.
Mosier, aye. All right, good
Okay,
night.
well, buenas noches.
Yeah, see you in 2
Good night.
weeks.
Be well, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you
Good
for
night.
all your work.
Thank you.